Welcome to the RIAI series of one-on-one conversations with Irish women architects around the globe. This is part of the RIAI Women in Architecture 2020 celebration, which unfortunately we can't hold in 8 Merrion Square this year. But that does give us the advantage of being able to go around the world and talk to our friends and colleagues and see what they are up to. My guest today is Aisling Kehoe, who is in Wellington, New Zealand. She is a graduate of Dublin School of Architecture in Bolton Street. And after graduating, she went to work on the OPW graduate scheme. She did her professional practice diploma in Ireland and became a member of the RIAI and was one of the youngest members ever of the RIAI Council, which she held a seat in 2016, 2017. So welcome, Aisling.
Thank you very much, Carole.
It's great to talk to you, even though you're so far away. It's one of the benefits of Zoom and all this new technology that we're embracing. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about why you studied architecture, your time in Bolton Street, and the early days after you graduated.
Yes, absolutely. So I suppose I started thinking about the career in architecture in and around secondary school, and I had the obligatory aptitude test that kept on coming back saying you should consider a career in architecture, which up until that point I hadn't really considered seriously. And then the more I looked into it, the more I felt like as if it had all of the streams of things and interests that I was interested in and that would actually suit me quite well. So I went to DIT in Bolton Street and I loved it. I mean, it was hard work. I remember the first day of college and they told us, be prepared, it's a full-time commitment. This is, you're going to have all-nighters, you're going to have late nights and early mornings, and it's going to be a big commitment. And it wasn't a lie, it was absolutely that. And then I was probably one of the few people, maybe a handful of people who did the 5 years straight through, because right bang in the middle of our college experience, the GFC hit. And the year ahead of us, when we were trying to decide on whether or not to take a gap year, the year ahead of us had all been sort of let go from their contracts with architectural firms. And we just all kind of decided that it just wasn't worth, potentially finding ourselves on a year out and not being able to travel or not being able to work. And that it was better just to do the 5 years straight through. And by the time we did actually graduate in 2011, the effects of GFC were still being felt in the country, in Ireland, and I think all of us struggled initially to find jobs. Definitely myself, it took me about 6 months just to find something. Most of us, I think, ended up on internships, unpaid internships, just to get our foot in the door, get kind of an understanding of like the practicalities of actually being an architect in practice, as opposed to just theoretically in college. And then I suppose the opportunity came to work on the OPW, or to be a graduate or architectural graduate with OPW RIAI training scheme. So there was about 30 of us who came in, and all of us worked in trim and had largely, the way that they divided up the work was that each of us, they tried to assign us a case study as quickly as possible. So there was always a very strong focus on case studies and part threes and getting registered. So there was definitely that focus from the very beginning. And from my experience, I joined at the same time as another graduate by the name of Brian, and we worked on social welfare offices, ironically, having spent time unemployed as well. So we worked on what we called the Intrio program, which saw the refurbishment of 50 offices nationwide, and I did about 25 concept designs, and he did 25 concept designs, and there was a huge amount of autonomy, freedom. We were literally said, just design it as you see fit. If you can argue it well, then it will be built, and we'll get approval from the client. And there was also a very strong influence of our focus again on mentorship. So they wanted us to know and understand the process and what we needed to do to not only be registered architects, but just to be, not just to get registered, but to be registered architects as well. So we were very fortunate in our mentor, who was Pat, who would spend time out of his day to try and teach us different aspects of being, like, what it meant to be an architect. And there's one example that always comes to mind, which was I was pulling together a tender documentation for a particular project, and I was very stressed about it. And he came up and started describing to me all of these health and safety forms. And I remember thinking, this is not the time, Pat, I'm really busy. And it was all because he was like, that you need to know what's going on in the background, that somebody else is doing this. This is going to be part, like, they'll ask you about this in your case study, and you'll need to do this for, you know, any future projects. And thinking back on it, you know, you just think, oh, that was so helpful. And his sort of view of, it's not just, you're not just somebody who's producing drawings, you're going to be an architect one day, and you're going to need to be able to do all of this stuff anyway, and you need to know about it now. So I have.
Yeah, so you found that a structured graduate program like that was better than maybe just being in a regular practice? Did you have friends or colleagues who had a very different experience? I mean, I know it was a difficult time for all graduates in 2011, 2012, and particularly getting to site. Was that something that they facilitated also?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what they always try to do is, so at the time there was a lot of schools going on. So there was a lot of schools being built across the country, and they kept them in-house. So a lot of people had schools as their case studies. For us, we kept 2 social welfare offices back and saw them through to construction. So there might have been a bit of a lull when we first started, but by the time we were at that point, you know, maybe 6 months in, we were all on site and we were all getting that experience. One of the key things, one of the things that I found being part of the scheme was that there were 30 other people who were in the same boat as yourself, and we had an automatic study group. We would come together, we'd all hand out questions and say, okay, you're doing this one, this is an important one, and we'd share it around. And then the even further benefit, because it's so well established, that we had questions from previous years. We had people who had sat down after their interviews and had written down what questions they were asked. So even though they, like, the likelihood of you being asked the same question would be highly unusual, it just gave you a sense of, well, they're just trying to figure out whether or not you know everything else that's involved in building that's not just architecture. So do you understand how, if you just got a site, what would be your first steps to actually building and designing and stuff like that? So it was a huge resource that definitely helped all of us.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that the current RIAI president, Kieran O'Connor, with his role as state architect in the OPW, is a real champion of the graduate training programme, and the RIAI is very keen that continues. I know it's expanded into some of the local authorities as well, and to the Department of Education. So it's a fantastic facility that we have in Ireland for training. It's great. So after the OPW, you went to Dublin City Council, is that right?
Yeah. So I really enjoyed public practice. And I think possibly my time as being unemployed and the sort of uncertainty that I started off with in terms of my architectural career probably led to me wanting a certain level of stability. But I also just liked the public sector and liked how we worked. And I understood it as well because I'd had that experience with the OPW. So I moved to Dublin City Council and spent the next 2 years trying to get a library refurbishment over the line, Kevin Street Library. It took a while, but it was really beneficial. And then on top of that, I was able, they afforded me the opportunity to go to RIAI Council as well. So they were very open to other opportunities and other ways that I should be branching out and opening my horizons, and the kind of career opportunities that were there that would both improve me, my experience as an architect, but also improve them as well, because they'd be getting first-hand feedback from me about how things were going in the RIAI and the work that they were doing and championing public sector.
And if there's anybody who's listening to you talk, Aisling, who has a kind of an interest in getting involved in the RIAI, have you any advice for them? Or
so the first year that I joined, I was the representative for the AAI. So I'd been involved with the AAI for maybe 2 years, and that opportunity, there's a seat there that's held by an AAI representative, and I joined. Ironically, I hadn't actually managed to get registered at that point. There was this, I don't know if you remember, Carole, but there was this really random about 4 or 5 month period where there had been just some complications of getting registration through. But and I don't think you have voting rights as an AAI rep, if I remember correctly, but it was just, I suppose it was incredible to sit around a table with so many experienced people, understanding what exactly were the really critical things that were happening in a profession, and what exactly the RIAI were trying to champion for, and how they were trying to tackle the many issues. And I found in the 2 years that I was working on council that many people came in thinking they were going to change the RIAI, it's going to change from the inside out, and the reality of it is they came out thinking, wow, they just do so much. Like, there's really so much that they're trying to do, and we're really impressed by everything. And I also, I mean, again, very lucky to have you as president and Catherine as well. So I looked at the two of you and said, well, there's two great women role models that I can look up to. And I came back and talked to my female colleagues and said, I mean, how they can manage a room, how they can talk about critical issues. It's just really inspiring as a young architect. And then, I mean, as aside from the AAI, which was my route in, I then went and was elected as ordinary member. So it was just as off chance of just having previously worked on council the year before, and Catherine asked if I'd try again, or get elected through the ordinary member process. And again, it was just, you know, there were new faces second year round, as there usually is, but just really inspiring. And you come away with it with a full appreciation of what challenges are facing your career as an architect, but also.
And I have to say, as somebody who's been involved in the RIAI since I went into practice on my own, and I felt I needed a support network around me, and that's how I got involved in the small practice forum in the institute originally. And then as I've moved up, I might not have gone away and come back, and I've always been involved. But it's great to see younger faces and enthusiasm and new ideas coming in too, and that's what keeps the RIAI fresh and keeps it motivated. And I know that Catherine and the executive team are always there to support what we as architects want to do. And I'm sorry, this is not a public broadcast on behalf of the RIAI. It's just the fact of it's the collegial kind of atmosphere, I think, that you find in the RIAI, and it's good to make the connections and try and make a difference.
And the great thing about New Zealand is you actually come here and you realize that they face the exact same issues. That, you know, through Catherine, I actually got to meet her equivalent in the New Zealand Institute of Architects, Tina Hale Pennington, when I first arrived in New Zealand. And surprisingly, the only thing she really wanted to talk about was open house, and how did we get open house organised in Ireland. And I was like, well, we just open our doors. I mean, the public sector are pretty good. Half of the buildings that open up during that weekend are public, and then the other half are probably residential, and everyone's a little bit curious about, you know, the guy next door, or the neighbor down the road who's got their extension. And in some ways, I mean, as a practice, what we face in Ireland is not necessarily exclusive to Ireland. It's across the board, and every country's feeling it. But we do seem to be able to promote architecture a lot better than those in New Zealand.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's a topic that I thought we might touch on, actually, because I see you're working in a practice that is, I just had a quick look at their website, and it seems to be primarily kind of engineering, infrastructure, urban planning, kind of high-level strategy type of project. Am I correct? And the architecture department is just a part of that bigger machine?
Yeah, so it's a global consultancy firm. Its headquarters are based out of Canada. New Zealand is one of the few countries that actually have an architectural department. It, along with Canada, and so they'll have Middle East, they'll have the UK, they'll have America, but largely speaking, there is no architecture departments there, and that's probably sort of, New Zealand is too small a country not to have it. That largely speaking, the work that we have in the building and property sector comes through architecture. So they'll come in and say, we just need a concept design, and by the end of it, they've got a full suite of disciplines who are now working on the project. So we have policies in place. We're looking at green specifically at the moment. Housing in New Zealand is particularly poor, and there would be a number of, there's been massive health issues, and it's costing the New Zealand economy quite a lot every year. And it's purely because their housing is of such poor quality and poor stock that they don't even, and their building code doesn't even support better, more insulated, better performing. And that's one of the biggest differences that you'll find in Ireland, between Ireland and New Zealand. They just haven't gotten their head around it. They, I think that they're building off of a building code that's meant for Australia, of a much warmer climate, and they haven't quite adjusted to their own realities, basically. So one of their policies within WSP is that they're trying to kind of raise the game, trying to get the building code up to scratch to what it needs to actually be healthy for New Zealanders to live in their houses. But also on the other side of sort of flip side, that we need a greener policy, and we need to be moving towards more green, sustainable economy than what we have at the moment. One of the sort of downsides, I suppose, of not being part of the EU, who are having an oversight of all of that kind of stuff, and who are sort of getting countries to sign on board to climate change policies. New Zealand don't have that oversight. They have to do that on their own, and they look to others like Australia or generally to the UK to see whether or not where they should be faring in their policies. But to date, they haven't really managed successfully so far.
That might come as a bit of a surprise to people, Aisling, because I suppose we see New Zealand as quite a sophisticated country, a population not dissimilar to our own, I believe. And yet we have this idea that, you know, certainly Scandinavian countries and countries like New Zealand have it just so much better than we do in so many ways, in terms of how they're structured. But one thing I think that has been managed extremely well in New Zealand, perhaps, or maybe it's because it's so far across the other side of the world, is the COVID issue. You mentioned housing a bit unhealthy, but there must be a good health system there. And
it is. I think New Zealand primarily is known for its education system, and then probably for its health system, not to the same standards that you would expect of Scandinavian countries, but I think we were also very lucky in terms of who we had in politics and when they were able to make the decision to close the borders. And Jacinda Ardern has faced quite a lot in her first term as Prime Minister, and I'm hoping there's a second term for her. But so it really came down to some very quick actions, quick decisions. And there had been charts, and I know everyone's probably fatigued by all the charts that we've seen so far over COVID-19, but there had been a chart of what would happen had COVID-19 fully spread through New Zealand, and it would have been absolutely detrimental to our health system. We just wouldn't have been able to cope with it. But yeah, they were, I think probably the reason why they're so fast moving on this is New Zealand are used to disasters. They're used to earthquakes, they're used to volcanoes, tsunamis. They're used to having a quick reaction time. So here they actually have a civil defense system where they will move quickly once they know that there's a natural disaster. So there's emergency operations centers that are scattered throughout the country that are highly resilient buildings. So they know that they can move fast once if an earthquake were to happen, for instance. So it's sort of in their nature to make those kind of quick decisions, to move quickly, and to, if they need to make some extreme measures like locking down the country, or, you know, for whatever reason, they're far more open to it and willing to it, and they see it as part of their duties, I suppose.
Yeah. So you can't leave New Zealand for the time being, isn't that correct?
I can leave. I just will be quarantined on my way back if I were to return.
Okay,
and
so
that
it's
quarantine I'd probably have to pay for. So
something
to bear in mind.
There isn't the same blanket restriction as, for example, the United States, where only people with US passports are allowed into the country at present.
No, people are allowed in. I don't know if you've seen any of the recent media reports on it, that we do have something like 14 active COVID-19 cases, but they're all in quarantine. So people who have traveled into the country have come in with COVID-19. And most of those people would have come over because a family member has fallen ill or something like that. So our travel restrictions at the moment are purely, largely speaking, they're essential travel. So this is the reason why you have to get into the country. And they don't look like as if they're going to be opening up anytime soon. I mean, there had been talks of opening up to Australia because they had largely eliminated COVID-19, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. But you can leave, but again, you'll be expected to remain in quarantine for 14 days on return.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of COVID and how it's affecting people who maybe like you might want to travel and work abroad, do you think that it's going to have a severe impact on the mobility of Irish architects to move around the world?
It's a hard one to say. I mean, we're definitely seeing people come in. We're in this sort of incredible situation at the moment where WSP are actually looking for architects and hiring. So it's just because the cornerstone of our work is government work, and of course there's a lot of government work going on as we try to stimulate the economy again. So there's definitely opportunities here, but whether getting in and getting a visa, there's definitely going to be some complications, I'd say, to get that turned around quickly enough. When I got my visa, so I came over on a working holiday visa. It was just meant for the year. When I joined WSP, they asked me would I like to go on to an accredited employer work visa, which meant that I could extend my stay to another 2.5 years, which is what I did. But even like the turnaround time to move from that temporary visa to a more permanent visa was something like 2 weeks, and that was pretty much unheard of. But you'll definitely struggle to get those kind of turnaround times now because people are just being so careful about. And one of the other things, I suppose, is as the recessions begin to hit countries, the likes of New Zealand will look to try and employ Kiwis first, just as a general rule of thumb, that they try to ensure that nobody's coming in from overseas who may be taking the job that could have gone to somebody who lives here and who's a citizen of here. So that will probably be another sort of hurdle for everyone to get over. But
so you have a visa which takes you up until 22. Is that what?
21.
21.
Yeah,
okay.
21. Yeah.
So what do you think you'll be up to next? What's your next plan, or have you thought that far?
Ideally, I'd like to come back to Ireland. That's all kind of hoping that the recession does not too badly affect Ireland. So I'll be keeping a close eye on media in Ireland for the next 6 to 9 months. But the hope is that by this time next year, I'd be on home soil again and hopefully employed.
And will you go back to the public sector, do you think, or have you got a taste for the private sector now?
So I'm one of those people who likes to jump as much as I can and take opportunities. So I'm actually considering maybe jumping to a contractor, like a construction firm, and just see how they work. Now that I've seen a taste of the public sector, now the private sector, and now I'm like, let's just see what the contractors are up to. So, but I'm open to all opportunities and seeing what happens. Yeah. I mean, it's like everything. Like this experience in New Zealand has opened, has been this amazing opportunity, and it's opened my eyes to how things work. And I think in any kind of future role, that's probably something I would be looking to do and to replicate.
Yeah, good. And just as the last question, seeing as this is all about women in architecture, how is the lot of the women architect in New Zealand? Is it better or worse, or about the same as Ireland?
It's pretty much the same, unfortunately. Hard to get opportunities sometimes. So what I've learned to do is actually to talk to your male counterparts, because they will tell you honestly. So one of the great things about working in a large organization like this is I had a male colleague who told me straight up that I was being underpaid, and I was not valuing myself as highly as I should, because I was an asset to this organization, which was a really lovely thing to hear. And I was like, well, that's going to spur me on, because I now know that I should be being paid more. And he gave me numbers that I should be pushing towards. And probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned is you should be asking questions. And as awkward as it is to ask people about their salaries, you have to do it, because otherwise, well, to the right people, obviously, but otherwise you are going to find yourself with this big pay gap. And it happens, and it definitely happens when you're coming from abroad and you don't know your own market value because you're totally new to the system. So you do, like me, in the last 2 years, I've had to climb up through the ranks and, you know, push for money when I felt like as if there was that I was bringing a lot more value than what I was like receiving in compensation. So yeah, definitely, if I had any like advice to give, it would be like talk openly with your male counterparts. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in your own organization. It can be like thread, and they can just give you some broad advice on approaching that subject.
Yeah. I think that's really, really good advice. And I think, you know, there's so many anecdotes out there about women not being afraid or not valuing their skills as highly as their male counterparts do. And even though the legislation is there that we're all supposed to be paid the same, human nature of employers is they'll only pay you what you ask for. So
yeah, exactly.
That's really, really good advice. So listen, thank you, Aisling. This has been really interesting conversation.
Oh, that's good.
Great to hear about New Zealand, and the opportunity for more Irish architects to go out there, and great to have the great.
Yeah, hopefully. There's quite a good number of us. So if you're looking for people to get in contact to ask questions, let me know, because there's a few of us out here.
Great. And you know what? This is what this event is all about, Aisling. It's all about networking and keeping in touch with each other and sharing experiences. So thank you very much indeed.
Okay. No worries.
Bye.
Bye.